Mixing things up is the spice of life, quite literally. Imagine if chicken could only and always taste like, well, chicken. Fortunately, we can blend flavors and come up with appealing concoctions that are sure to tickle the taste buds. In the world of video, blending modes can do the same sort of thing for our images. So this week, we're going to take a look at blending modes and see what type of looks they can give our projects. Shaken or stirred, we're cutting class. Without understanding blending modes, they can really become a novelty that we only use on a trial and error basis. With little understanding, they can become a powerful tool that we can use to alter the looks of our images for some really cool looks. For a little more on this, let's go into the archives.
Blending modes, also known as compositing modes, seem to be a magical mystery. Maybe the math magician can help us dispel the magic.
Blending modes aren't magic. They're mathematical equations that use the numeric value of the pixels in an image to determine how the pixels of one image mix with the pixels of another image to create a new composite image. This new image is the result of the blend.
Wow! Thanks, math magician. I'm gonna blend my pixels frappe.
Now that we know how blending modes work, why don't we take a look at what some of the more common blending modes are? For our discussion today, we'll refer to the bottom layer, the one that won't have a blending mode change, as our base image. The upper layer, the one which will be blended, we'll refer to as our blend layer. The most obvious blending mode is the normal mode. It's the default for your images. If your blend layer is set to normal over your base track, it looks simply like one layer stacked on the other. Multiply is one of the most common blending modes. It multiplies the color of the blend layer by the color of the base layer, resulting in a darker image. With multiply, black remains black and white doesn't show up. Screen is the opposite of multiply. It multiplies the inverse of the blend layer by the inverse of the base and results in a brighter image. With screen, white appears as white and black doesn't show up. Screen is useful if your situation calls for your blend to appear as if it was projected on your base, such as, an archived educational film on top of a chalkboard. Add is very similar to screen, but as opposed to multiplying the inverse, it adds the color value of the blend layer with the color value of the base layer, always resulting in a lighter color. It's a great option if you want to light something up. If you want to add smoke to a shot, you can shoot smoke in front of a black surface. Make the smoke footage your blend layer, set its mode as add, and you now have smoke in your shot. Subtract, as you would guess, does the opposite of add. It subtracts the color value of the blend layer from the base, resulting in a darker image. Black appears as transparent. Overlay is one of the most interesting modes. The blend layer looks at the pixels in the base layer. If the color value of the base pixels is above 50%, or a value of 128 out of 255, the blend pixels will screen. If the color value of the base pixels are below 50%, or a value of 128 out of 255, the blend pixels will multiply. Now these are just a brief selection of blending modes, but some of the more common ones, and they're a good foundation for what we're about to do. Now knowing these can help us achieve some pretty cool looks. This is our shot. A look that was popularized by still photographers is one that uses a glass gradient tobacco filter. We'll simulate this effect. Here, I have a gradient of orange-brown that ramps down to white. I'm going to place it on the layer above the footage in my timeline. I'm going to change the gradient's blending mode to multiply, adjust its opacity, and get the color I want. There we go, and cool. Let's take another shot here. We're going to brighten and diffuse this image, make it kind of dreamy. I'm going to hold down the Shift and Option keys while I click and drag my clip in the timeline to the next layer up. Notice that it's copied the clip, so now I have two instances of the same clip synced up, stacked together on two layers. I'm going to apply a Gaussian blur filter, set at 10 pixels to the top clip, and then set its blending mode to screen. Again, I'm going to adjust its opacity to suit my needs. And there we go, a soft diffused image. We can take these principles even further by combining them to design new looks for our footage.
Here's our original shot. It's nice looking stuff, but we're going to build on it by expanding its dynamic range with some dark shadows and soft highlights. We'll give it more punch to the color.
Here I have my footage in my timeline. I'm going to shift option the clip onto the track above it, and again to the track above that. I'm going to turn off the top two tracks and color correct my base track, bump up its saturation, and give it a slight tint to lightly wash it in a color that works for my subject matter. I'll turn back on my second track and start to make some adjustments to the clip here. First, I'm going to drop the saturation here, not all the way to saturated, but it's going to be pretty dull. Next, I want to adjust the levels of my luminance values. I'm going to blow out my highlights, pump up my mids pretty high, and then adjust my shadows so only the darker areas in my image can be seen. I want these areas to be the spots where I want the shadows to be heavy and dark in my image. I set the blending mode for the clip on this track to multiply, and I drop its opacity according to where I want it. Note that we now have a composite image with some intense shadows that sit a little heavy at the lower end of my midtones. Now we're going to turn on our top track. Again, we're going to drop the saturation. Now we're going to adjust the levels by crushing the blacks, followed by dropping our mids and bumping our highlights so we have a few select highlights standing out on black with a few gray highlights across some larger areas. Next, I'm going to add a Gaussian blur filter set to about 7 pixels, and I'm going to set this clip's blending mode to screen and drop its opacity slightly. And notice how we now have soft diffused highlights that increase the dynamic range of our entire image. Not only are we getting a customized latitude, but the image is softened up. Now if we want, we can go back and add additional layers such as colored gradients to even further enhance this look.
Blending modes are powerful, and when used right, they have the potential to give your images looks that never seemed possible. Start off by writing down formulas and recipes